Workday is going to have to provide a list of customers who used HiredScore's AI features for hiring. This will be used to determine if bias then affected the hiring decisions that were made. And so that'll be next. But you were kind of getting into the nitty gritty of how this came to be.
Welcome to the HR Huddle podcast, presented by Sapient Insights Group, the ultimate resource for all things HR. It's time to get in the huddle.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Spilling the Tea on HR Tech, where we focus on the hottest HR tech news everyone needs to know to be in the know. We break down the news of the week and help you make sense of what it means for our industry and how it can impact your organization. And we are recording today on August 14th, 2025. We got to August already. I feel like it was just the end of July last time we talked, and it probably was, right? And we're bringing you all the news you can use this week. I'm your host, Stacey Harris, Chief Research Officer and Managing Partner for Sapient Insights Group, a research and advisory firm if you haven't worked with us previously. And joining me today is my great co-host, Cliff Stevenson, Director of Research and Principal Analyst for Sapient Insights Group. Cliff, welcome to the conversation. We ripped through our green room conversation today on all the topics we're going to talk through, but there's a lot going on. The tea is boiling hotter than some of the weather is right now. And we're going to get into all of it, right? I mean, it's you were literally like, okay, if we have 20 minutes for this or 10 minutes for this, we can get through it all. So I think we're going to try and get beyond at least below an hour today, right?
That's right. We'll see. Last episode, a fortnight ago, I felt like we didn't have much to talk about in terms of M&A activity or people moves. Well, we have made up for it in the last 14 days. Some of these are going to be some historical moves, both from organizations and from people. A lot of really cool things. I think some of the news we've heard in terms of job market has been dire, but I do feel much more positive seeing where the HR and HR tech space is. Hang in there, people. We have some good news for you. So that's my teaser. We're all in this together. It's like
we have good news. Is that where are we starting on the survey data? Is that where?
Yeah, that's the greatest news, and that's all thanks to you listeners in survey data. So please, Stacey, you got some numbers for us.
Yeah, well, so if we were a little quiet last week, we apologize, because I know some of you, we owed some emails to, some papers I was working on, you've been working on, Cliff, so bear with us. We know this is always a tough time because everybody wants deliverables ready for HR tech, and we're in the deep dive of data. So we're always trying to balance a little bit right now. But last week we got a deep dive into our data, and then this week we actually did all of our UX and vendor stat scores. So for those who are going to get high ratings in the number 1 and top 5, you should be getting some emails out next week about when the time this podcast will be launching. So we had we've said this before, but we are now correct. It is 10,000 plus participants who hit the survey, put something into it, started the survey at some level, right? And then we had over 4,300 individual organizations who we cleaned the data down to. And that still is a pretty amazing data set. It's almost 30% more than the previous year, which was at 33,116, I think it is, something like that. So we really just every year, I think we just get more and more deep data in the data set. And it's, we just appreciate you guys. We know part of it is this year, the world is kind of upside down. Everybody wants to know what's going on. And so we think that's a big part of it. But Cliff, we've spent a lot of time in the last 2 weeks looking at this data. And I always tell people, I'm not teasing because someone asked us about 2 weeks ago, can you give us this, early? And we're like, we can give it to you, but the data, we don't have all the regionals in. We don't have all the types of companies. We actually go in and validate that the company is the size they say and that they're a type of company that they are and who owns them and what regions they're in. So it could be incorrect if you're looking at different breaks or cuts. And so we really do take our time to do the cleaning the way we want to. This year, they're going to see a couple of things. So we are going to have, I think, some upsets this year, Cliff, in our UX and vendor satisfaction. So that, I think, if anybody's coming to HR Tech Conference in September in Las Vegas, the week of September 16th, 17th, right, Cliff?
That's right, 15th through the 19th, possibly.
19th, yeah. You will get to hear what's happening and sort of who's upsetting, particularly the mid-market this year. So that is, mid-market for us, again, is at 500 to 5,000 employees. Cliff, you also we put into the emerging tech space some new X and Stat charts for who was it? Will we be talking to Open AI? I think it is, right? Liz telling us, right?
Sam Altman, I assume you're a regular listener,
Yeah.
viewer. Just reach out to us directly.
Yeah.
But no, we're going to have AI, especially as how it's being used in the HR space. We're actually going to have user experience and vendor satisfaction scores for the first time. And why not, right? We've been talking throughout this entire year, last 12 months, longer, about how people
Nonstop.
are kind of blending AI. I don't want to give away too much, but this whole idea of how you're using your own AI and where
Yes.
that's going to fit in. And what do you think of it? Is it useful? We went out, we asked you directly to kind of cut through some of that marketing noise. We have good friends in marketing, don't mean that negatively, but they have a job to do and we have a job to do. So we're going to have those charts. We're also going to be talking about contingent workforce. We see more and more people working in the gig economy, working as contingent workers. And now let's see, what are the systems used to manage those and what are we finding useful? So UX and VX charts of that. And like you said, there's going to be some upsets in the mid-market, but Stacey, we're also going to see some changes in some other areas that I think are going to be very interesting. I think spending.
Yeah, there will be changes in spending plans, what people are spending on is going to alter slightly. And it's been kind of not stagnant, but pretty similar year over year the last couple of years. So there will be some changes. I think that some we will have expected, some we won't. And I think also you're going to get a chance to see that there's a we just got so many more responses this year that meant that we could slice the data by a lot of different things, by industry, by size, by region, that all of it won't be in the big report because we just can't fit it all in the report. The big report is very much the aggregate data set, but we will have other opportunities to get access to the data in different ways going forward. And because for example, I was just talking to Terry. Terry's doing a panel on women in HR tech with a really great panel. She's closing out the women in HR tech session with her panel on AI and women. And we were just looking at, is there a difference between male and females in what in what they're aware of as how their company is doing ethical approaches to AI? And there's a pretty big difference, right? There was no difference in the use of AI based off of male or female, right? Like, and so, we were just looking at a couple of things like that. There was a big difference in the use of AI if you were a millennial and then Gen Z versus a baby boomer. So that wasn't surprising, but we're able to do a lot more cuts this year because of that. So I'm really excited about how deep the data is and how rich it is this year. So if you want to get access to that, you definitely want to stay for Thursday at the HR Tech Conference. Our session is the first one in the morning at 8 a.m. Do not sleep in. I know that's a really easy thing to do after Wednesday night with all of the events, because you're going to get insights and data there that we will not share anywhere else because it's not in the paper. It's only I need to provide context for it, and that's where we do it. Cliff, you and I were talking a little bit too about what we're going to do at Ask the Expert. Do you want to tell them what our plans are for the Ask the Expert that will follow our session at HR Tech?
That's right. We've been doing this Ask the Expert
Yeah.
for a little while. It feels so weird to say that about yourself. It's like, oh, the imposter syndrome. But yeah, we have this. That's their name for it. So it will be an Ask the Expert where you can just come up directly to us and ask some questions. And what we're going to do this year is we're going to have our head of data science, Tammy Smith, there, who will be ready to pull individual data. Because oftentimes people ask us, well, what does it look like for manufacturing? I'm working at this. Well, we will do that. We are saying, you come up, you ask us a question.
We haven't told Tammy this yet. She's going to listen and she's going to be like, what are you doing? But she's coming to HR Tech this year. And we were just having, we're going to have some special reports brought out. So we have some data. And I was like, oh, Tammy's there. She can actually do a little data crunching while we're talking. So yeah, we're going to put a limit on that, right?
Yeah, one stat per customer. So
yes.
Come up, be ready. But you don't necessarily need to have a data point that you want, but we will be ready for that.
At the expo hall, yeah.
Yeah, because that is usually the question is, how does this relate to me? We always do break it down by size, but sometimes some of the industry cuts or the great thing about having a data set this size is we can get very granular. We can say just Canadian companies that are under 100, what are their uses of AI? We can tell you.
We can. I can't promise exactly how many will be in that data cut, but we can tell you. So yes, that's a good way to put it. So, and Tammy's amazing. You'll get getting a chance to meet her. She's very she's an extrovert to my introvert. Cliff and her get along great as far as extroverts. I'm in the background going, okay, I got to stop reading my book so I can pay attention to what's going on in the room. So we balance each other well. I think we also want to know, and I we get so busy with the survey and getting through the process and everything. I just a final thank you to all of the vendors who distributed this year. I mean, we had over 74 vendors who actually sent the link out. We got data from. We had over almost 100 promised to distribute, but there's always people who send the link out or don't get it out to wherever they want it to, and that happens. But 74 vendors, and I'm saying vendors and not in the sense of all, a lot of them are media outlets, they're associations, they're independent consulting firms. Like it runs the gamut as to the people who support this research and get value out of this research too, is from what they tell us. I mean, that's our win-win, right? But who distribute. And I just want to tell you that, go out and take a look at those vendors and those organizations, because that will tell you a lot about how they value their customers and their approach to the market. Because, we just got done with UX and vendor stats. There are some vendors who distribute amazingly. They're not going to get top ratings. Like, it is all your voice, right? And some of them know that because they know they're in rebuild mode right now, right? And they know that they're not going to be in a number one ranking spot like maybe some other organizations are, because they just know they're in rebuild mode right now and they're working on their customer satisfaction. They're working on things, but they want to hear and they want to get the feedback and they want to understand what they can do better. And that's why they participate in this. So just a thank you to those organizations who spend so much time and so much effort. We do know how much work it takes. And we also understand what it's like to get back the data and go, all right, I knew I had problems, but to know that I'm not even in the top 5 in an area that we know we've got maybe a really good solution, but for some reason it's not connecting with our buyers or the people who are using it. And we need to dig into that. It's just an important thing for me to note that those organizations are doing that. I don't know, Cliff, if I've said that well. You and I were talking about how to have that conversation, right?
Yeah, that's a really positive way to put it. I was a little more cynically saying, beware of those that do not seem to want to listen, the heads in the sand, that don't really want to get that information. They don't want to distribute, but it would seem like I'm self-serving, just trying to get more to distribute, but it is helpful. But yeah, we're not going to name names because we just said, they're not as high up in the, the UX and VS voice of the customer scores, but they are listening. They are reading your comments, all those things you write. We've seen some of these comments. Some of you people, it's like James Joyce. It's these huge novels that you've written, and we love that. And those vendors, the ones that take this seriously, they love that they are making changes to their platforms based on what you've written. It's basically a backdoor and easy way in to get the head of product to see exactly what you need changed. Sometimes, just comments, it gets lost in the void. But when they know that it's from such a objective and outside source, they start really hearing it and starting to see it and go, this is what we need to do. Can't say it's all of them, but we will let you know. We try to always say these are the vendors we know are taking this seriously, and seeing that change happen over time is revording. So.
Yeah, and it's always a hard thing for us because I think there are other platforms. I think their analyst views are important in all levels. We talked a little bit about it last time when we were talking about Matt Charney's comical, but a little too close to home sometimes commentary on analysts. But it's hard to be in a position where you're saying, look, this is the customer commentary, and it can't change because it's not my opinion, it's not Cliff's opinion, it's what the customers are saying. And I think that is always a place where it's been the best part of my job doing this for over 10 years now, and the hardest part of my job doing it for 10 years. Every time we get done with this season, I'm always, my heart breaks for some people who I know are trying really hard and just haven't gotten there quite yet. So we'll excited about where we're going to go. There are some really good, cool stuff. But with that as a note, it might be a good time to transition to some of the stuff that's going on in the industry. People are doing things to try and improve that, right? So this is part of what we talk about, is what are people doing to try and make a change, right?
Exactly. And as you said, sometimes they are busy. They can't distribute because they're going through a merger and acquisition. And one of the biggest ones in our memory is going to be, I would say, top 20 maybe, is going to be this one. SAP has entered an agreement to acquire Smart Recruiters. So, one of the biggest in talent acquisition space, Smart Recruiters. SAP, I think, needs no introduction, just one of the biggest overall organizations.
Yeah.
And we started to look at, some of the historic deals. Now, numbers have not been disclosed when this happens. It'll happen in Q4. And as that kind of comes along, we'll get some more data. Stacey, you had looked at some comparisons and some other really large buys in that sort of space, and Oracle buying Taleo. That was, and these, I'm going to give you adjusted for inflation numbers and the first number. So 1.9 billion is what it was just for inflation. That'd be like 2.7 billion today. And when SAP bought SuccessFactors, that was 3.4 billion or 4.8 billion in today's numbers, because both of those are about 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, really intense. We're going to be talking a lot about the talent acquisition space and tech today, because, we saw some information. George LaRoque, friend of the show, had given us some numbers and put some numbers on a post that he made talking about some data to kind of think about that. And he mentioned of the funding that's happened this first half of 2025, right? First 6 months, 2025, there's been 3.52 billion in total funding in just talent acquisition across 117 deals. So, that gives you an idea that this is a space where people are seeing growth and movement. So,
and I think it is, like you said, Cliff, there is, this is one of the bigger ones, particularly with talent acquisition. Smart Recruiter's been around for a long time. I don't think it's as big as the Taleo or as the SuccessFactors acquisition, but there, when those things happen, I was in the midst of, I think I was moving from Burson to Brandon Hall at that point in time. I can remember like literally the SAP buying SuccessFactors happened right before the holidays, and I had just taken some time off, and I was like, why the heck are they doing this now? I literally had to like come off vacation to go write the little, blog post, whatever, right? And those were the start of, right, the kind of dominoes of other things sort of happening. And I think what we're seeing in the market a little bit here is there's been a lot of small acquisitions. So startups and Smart Recruiters has been around for a long time. They had about 4,000 customers. Our data, not their data, our data showed that they were more mid-market than enterprise, right? But they had pretty high ratings in the UX of Interstats last year in that mid-market space. They didn't make any of the charts. They didn't quite have enough responses in our data set. SuccessFactors also has their own applicant tracking system. And so you're kind of looking at Smart Recruiters has an ATS, but they also have a lot more candidate focused forward. The tools, a lot of AI built into them. They didn't start with AI because they've been around for a little while, but they've built an infrastructure that was more flexible, more capable of handling AI than what we've seen in a lot of the other applications who have been longstanding ATSs like SuccessFactors was back in the day. And so SuccessFactors also had a pretty high ranking in user experience better stats at the enterprise level last year. This year, we're going to see that the numbers aren't exactly in the same place. And I think, too, again, this conversation we had about why do people do acquisitions, it's really a couple of reasons, right? One is they're buying customers. And I do think that's a bit of buying customers on some level. I don't know if SAP SuccessFactors needed that mid-market as much, but I do think it is a value add. There was some crossover, and I think that crossover is going to be good because they can cross-sell to each other, right? So there are customers that Smart Recruiters had that SAP wants to get into their sort of SAP enterprise HRMS environment, and vice versa. There are SAP HRMS customers who probably need a more sort of forward-looking ATS recruiting tool. The other thing that I felt, which I commented in an HR Executive magazine article on, that is really important here is the talent they're picking up from Smart Recruiters. Smart Recruiters has been at the forefront of what's going on with AI and at the forefront of thinking differently about talent acquisition remember one of the very first conversations I had way back, early days with Jerome, who started the company, and the team that was working on it. I think Maxim was the gentleman who was working with at the time. Was they were kind of doing this freemium concept that no one else had done, and they were going to create sort of this broad group of sort of candidates that you could start to sort of scrape from, and that was so new at the time. We were like, what are they doing? This is so weird. And that's morphed a lot since those first days, but that was where the Smart Recruiters impetus started, was just to be very different, and they started out with that model in mind. And recently, Rebecca Carr took them over maybe 2 years ago. I want to say it hasn't been that long. I think she's really done a good job, I think, of pulling together all the things that are going on in Smart Recruiters and getting that to a point where it is ready for an acquisition, and which SAP took advantage of. So I think they're getting talent. I think they are getting some crossover clients. And I do think that they are getting prepared for what I do anticipate is even more positions across the market, is what I'm thinking, Cliff. So as I always say, it's a space to watch, right? This definitely will be a space to watch, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the hits keep coming. We've got another big acquisition. Now, this one may not seem as big, kind of depending on where you work, but NeoGov has been acquired by a partnership between two funding groups, EQT AB out of Sweden, together with the Canada Pension Plan, Canada Pension Plan Investment Fund. Fun.
Yeah.
It's a fun plan. CPP is, let's go with that. So NeoGov, if you work anywhere outside the public sector, you may not realize how big they are, but they are very much the go-to HCM suite for public sector, for public safety, like police departments, think law enforcement agencies, and education. So this is really huge. I did some digging in. And one of the things we were talking about in the green room was, okay, this is interesting because EQT had primarily bought infrastructure, but they have also done joint investments with CPP before in schools. So I was wondering, that's interesting why sort of diversifying now, but it could be because they have found that that's the software used in a lot of their infrastructure and schools and said, okay, maybe this is the sort of the next step. I thought you, Stacey, had a good sort of alternate theory, or maybe like I said, there's a lot of reasons these acquisitions happen.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there's also the fact that we are very aware, particularly here in the United States, but I think in some of the other areas that NeoGov sort of works, that a lot of federal and local government entities, right, and not just the broader public sector, are looking at more off-the-shelf cloud-based solutions. Not NeoGov has a cloud component to it, but they're also sort of much more on the traditional side. And I think so there's competition, right? And so NeoGov has to be able to compete with that. And I'll say in our user experience and vendor stats, NeoGov shows up if we slice by industry. It's the only place that shows up is if we slice by industry. And when we do slice by industry, it's kind of middle of the pack. It's rarely rated high, particularly by people if they've come from another organization, used another solution, right? It's graded high by those who are in that industry, stay in that industry. They love it because it's very tailored to that industry, right? And so I do think there's a need to probably update and upgrade to compete with what's coming down the pike. And then there's this opportunity of maybe consolidating, especially for a private equity firm, to sort of build all of this together in an environment for just their industry. Well, I will say, I think we're going to see more PE activity across the HR tech market. We saw quite a bit of that in that sort of 2008, 2009 timeframe as people were coming out of the recession. I don't know the date as when Infor Lawson was picked up by Infor when Lawson was, but you saw quite a few PE firms sort of then investing in, like Ceridian then was picked up, a couple others. Ultimate was picked back up again by PE. And then the idea for most software when they picked up by private equity firms is that they're going to build them up, invest in them, and then put them back out for public. So they're going to do an IPO. And so we're right now in this cycle where we're probably going to see more PEOs picking up a lot of the software with the idea that they're going to improve on it and get it back out there for when they can add AI or they can add some things and make it more valuable from an IPO perspective. So it'll be interesting to see where this goes. And I do think it's something that, particularly if you're in the public sector space, you should be watching what softwares you have available and do I have the service levels I need? Because that's really what it comes down to in an industry-based solution, right?
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
And another one that we have mentioned before on the show, when we're talking about mergers, acquisitions, I can't remember if it was last show or the show before, but we mentioned that Joined and Cloud Connectors had merged. The name at that time, the temporary name, was Joined Cloud Connectors, just put it all together. You know, they're an integrator, right? That's what they do. They're integration. So they've decided they're going to integrate into a whole new name. I wrote that copy for them. So they are now going to be called Tavio, possibly Tavio, Tavio. Their reasoning for that name is it comes from octo, that's Avis, octo 8 in Latin, and they like the infinity symbol. They're using that a lot in their story, right? They're an infinite path, and via, a way or path, right? So a lot of Latin there.
Yeah, I always caution organizations about really, and I say this knowing that Sapient is very Latin, right? And its insights is a Latin origin point. But when you go too deep into Latin and all the different variations of it with your name, the one that, and I don't even know if it was Latin, but I remember is when Topia came about with their name, right? I remember I was like, and to this day, I still have to think, and I'm not even sure it's Topia. I don't know, right? If I have to think about the name when I'm getting ready to say it, it's one step farther than I want to go. So again, love the team over there at Joined and Cloud Connectors, hoping this goes well for them. But it's a name change that I think we're going to have to think a little bit about before we say it. So that was the
Possibly.
conversation.
We'll get some fun, but the
Yeah.
fundamental product isn't changing. And
Yeah.
it remains this concept of integrations
Yeah.
just ties so much into a major theme of the last year and going forward. This idea of the cluster model of purchasing an anchor system and having a cluster. You've heard us talk about it. If you've
Yeah.
ever seen Stacey or I present, you'll know this is something that both predicted and are continuing to watch the development of. And
Mhm.
integral to that sort of model is strong integrations, true integrations, not just I can pull data, but actually seeing two-way, secure, and correct data flow.
It flows. Yeah, and it was interesting. So we just got done today. So there will be a replay of it, I think, by the time you see our podcast, of doing a webinar with BetterWorks on AI in the future and where things are going with the HR solutions and how AI and how HR preps for being an AI forward-looking organization. And one of the questions that came out with that was a very good question, because I don't know that we've explained it that way previously. What they asked is basically the question was is sort of like, if I'm doing performance management, is always connected to recruiting, is always connected to learning in these platform clusters. And our answer is actually no. It is not just a recreation of what is the talent management suite, right? Or the HRMS suite. It's actually much more business focused than that. What we generally see, and we're going to try, it's a really hard thing to get numbers on, because the way we're seeing it, every sort of cluster is sort of very distinct to the company and their business needs. But I might have performance management tied to time and attendance in one organization because we're tracking activity level performance, and I want to have ratings and rankings on that along with the time tracking that I'm doing. And that's where where I'm doing my activity tracking. In another organization where maybe you're doing consulting firms, I might need to have learning and I might have to have learning and my performance management tightly connected, because, or no, I think it was engagement. I said engagement platforms tightly connected, because my engagement is directly connected oftentimes in a big consulting firm to how much you're developing me or how much you're growing. And so this is actually breaking up a little bit that idea of the talent suites or the HR suites. Those were kind of built in a silo and with the idea that they were the easiest data points to connect. But what's really happening in a lot of these is that I now need to connect more business data. So I want to get closer to a business process than I do to a HR talent process, is what's happening. And that's very distinctly, and makes it very different, this platform cluster conversation, right? I don't know if I explained that well, Cliff, but I think it's one of the things we're seeing. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
The use case podcast is where technology vendors get to talk about themselves. And it's a wonderful place for vendors, investors, and practitioners to listen to the story of the solution, the features, the benefits, the attributes, etc. And we get to know the CEO or founder during the call, and we also get to know the tech. So subscribe to the Use Case Podcast.
Yeah, and it's something we're going to continue to keep an eye on. So, yeah, another one that's been kept an eye on is the Workday. I forget the name of the actual case, but Workday has been going through some legal stuff going on, and going back to this whole idea of using AI in the talent acquisition space is central to all of this. So this came down to another acquisition, actually, when Workday acquired HiredScore, that came with some, I guess, agreements. Stacey, you did the real hard work of reading through the legalese and this huge document going over this ruling. I know that
Yeah.
high level bullet points is that Workday is going to have to provide a list of customers who used HiredScore's AI features for hiring. This will be used to determine if bias then affected the hiring decisions that were made. And so that'll be next. But you were kind of getting into the nitty gritty of how this came to be, right?
Yes, yeah. So the actual lawsuit is Mobley versus Workday, and it's been going on for almost a full year now. Not more than that, almost quite, but it's been actually. And what happened was the federal judge came down with, I think, one, early on, I think people thought this was going to be dismissed, and it wasn't, right? And I think part of the reason it wasn't is that we are seeing judges in particular, and in certain states in particular, are wanting to find places where they can have these conversations. And so they are allowing some things to go forward, which traditionally would have been probably sort of handled in the back room, and they would have just done a sort of a buyout of it and a class action sort of handshake, right? That definitely didn't happen here with this Workday one, and which is bringing more up to light, and it's definitely causing angst for the Workday organizations and also for the Workday customers, because the idea that their data might be passed over is a real concern for many of them. But what really this was, I think that the thing that when I dug deeper into this, and I'm by no means legal, and we have good friends like Kate Bischoff and Heather Reesing, who we would recommend you go talk to on LinkedIn if you have real deep questions about this and you're a Workday customer. But basically what was asked is that in the Mobley, original Mobley lawsuit, there was language that said, we believe that there is bias in currently how they're doing it, and the reason this is so important is because we are looking at what they're doing today and all future recruiting efforts through the Workday platform. So they were bringing into that case, just by using that words of all future possible recruiting processes that were being done by the Workday platform. And here's the important thing, is that when Mobley versus Workday was sort of submitted, and when all of that happened, HiredScore was nowhere in the picture, not at all, right? Like HiredScore wasn't even, I mean, they might have been a partner, but they weren't a Workday solution, and they definitely weren't an acquisition. And so what the algorithm that was being used at that point in time did not have any HiredScore language in it. They might have had a partnership with it, but that would have been a different dialogue, right? And so this whole sort of the way this lawsuit was written and the way it was written brought in, now once they acquired HiredScore, now I can look at what we've done in the past, and I'm looking at what we're doing now. And that's what allowed them to bring in all of the current organizations that Workday is. And here's the thing, and I'm not a law person, so I go back, ask Heather and Kate, or even go back to Workday and ask their legal group. But the piece for me that kind of caught my eye on all this is that if Workday was going through the acquisition process for HiredScore, knew they had this on the docket and knew that this was a legal thing, why weren't they looking at that specific language? Because that brings in, previously it's all algorithms, and Workday's been very clear about what their algorithms pull, how they pull it, what they do. I think it would have been very easy to explain to a judge and to a hiring and to a jury, if they get to a jury, what happened to the Mobley specific conversation, and where some of the possible biases could have come from, and whether or not they were driven by the algorithm itself, or whether they were driven by biases inside the companies, and who owns that responsibility, because that's really what the conversation is about. But HiredScore is a more traditional and one of the newer AI solutions, and there is, not completely, but a bit of a black box in there from an AI perspective. You don't always know what AI is going to do. It's orchestrating the communications in some way. And I do think that by bringing HiredScore into this picture, they're definitely making this a lot harder to explain and a lot harder to muddying the waters. And I don't know if they had that conversation when they were buying HiredScore, how that might be impacted by this lawsuit or not. I'm assuming somebody did. They're a big company. They have all these things. But that's the challenge, right? I think as a buyer or as an employee, as someone who's using the Workday, I think your big conversation is to make sure legally you're talking to your legal support, whether that's internally or externally, and saying, could any of this impact us? And I think you have to have that conversation with Workday, and I'm sure many of you are already, and you have to have your own legal involved in that. But I think this is a warning shot for everyone using AI in recruiting, that you have to be very clear that you can understand what the algorithms were trained on. You know what the risk is that you have, that there might be bias in there, that whether or not your own data is biased. Cliff, you and I were talking about this on the last podcast, or the last webinar as well, is this idea of risk assessment, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the risk versus reward. Yeah. And I think people often think about that in terms of just certain kinds of risk and certain kinds of reward, right? It's not just the cost of it. It is the perception from your end users. It could be legal risk. It could be time spent. Sometimes we find these tools that we're hoping are going to save us time, but it's just not needed. In that webinar, there was some great conversation, and one of the people on there said, oftentimes AI is presented as proof of concept rather than proof of value, right? They're like, look, it can do those things, rather than doing those things will save us money. And it is worth the, not just, again, the cost of the thing, but any potential problems could come down, because you have potential risk when you're hiring someone. You have potential risk with any system. So, AI is no different, and it should not be treated any differently, right? We always should make those considerations. Just there's different types of risk you need to be on the lookout for.
Yeah, and the thing that we're hearing, this was a great conversation I had with Danielle Boshin over at Sanofi, and I think me and her sort of talked about this risk conversation. She's like, at this point, why would I turn on something that could potentially be at risk with regulations down the road? It's yeah, recruiting could be made faster, it could be done better, but I have to kind of weigh that with that level of risk. Where another organization I was talking to said, but the business outcome of maybe using AI to find the next sort of cancer treatment. Now that risk is much more valid and well worth AI being involved in that, right? Because it has such a big impact. We just really have to really think about the level of risk we're willing to take. I love what AI, I mean, I use AI on a pretty regular basis for writing, right, these days, just to help me to generate ideas and think a little bit more about how I structure stuff and, rethink a little bit, maybe how I will explain a chart, because I know explaining charts is really hard. Like, is there a better way to do this? But I really balance that with, I'm not going to throw a bunch of data in there or any information that we've gotten from an individual organization. Yes, it could maybe read through our comments faster than I could, but I don't know that that risk warrants the reward I would get from that. I think those are some of the conversations we have to have at this point, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And in our paper, this isn't just a plug. That is one of the things we were curious about is how people are using AI. So in our paper, we were going to be presenting some more in depth about how are you using it and how are different groups using it, what types of problems are they hoping to solve with AI, what sort of risks are they running up against, what sort of barriers are stopping adoption or causing adoption. So,
Yeah.
and I'm not trying to be
A
teased,
shout
we
out
just don't
to
know
the
those
people
numbers.
who got to the end of our survey clip, the end of our, listen, we know it's a long survey. We got to complete. At the end of our survey, there's one question that basically said, how are you using it? And there was an open end that said, can you explain this? And they still wrote, there was a lot of people who said, I use it for this. And it was like one sentence and we got it. You're tired at this point. There were people who still wrote a book. And I was like, thank you for being so eloquent. We're going to share that. We are definitely going to put that in the paper, but just thank you guys. Cause I know, like, you get to that question, you're like, okay, I've just answered 25 different questions on all these other topics. How am I going to tell you about AI? But again, this community is so good at sharing what they're doing. So we
Yeah,
will definitely
really,
put that out there. Yeah.
yeah, really wonderful insights. Also, some really wonderful insights came to us through HR Executive this week. So, as we like to do, we believe that all information is good as long as you understand where it's coming from and you can find value. We like to say the voice of the customer, but we believe also there's a space for analysts and other people that are very knowledgeable in the community, such as Steve Bose from HR Tech, the conference chair, and the people at HR Executive Magazine, who were looking at some of what they call the top HR products in the competition and gathering information and looking at that. And they really saw a lot of kind of cool uses. Cool is probably a little too soft. They found valuable and useful future leaning products, especially in the AI space. Amongst, read some of these off. I think I can just get through this list. We'll just do it all because they all are deserving of respect.
Yeah.
ADP Lyrics, HCM, Chime Workplace, Degreed Maestro, Eightfold AI Recruiter. I knew there's going to be more. Expert by Will Sowers Watson, GP Gia, Harper by Whisk, Immersive Job Previews by Paradox, I Want by Paycom, Plum's Role Model, V for Visier, and Workday Wellness. So again, they were singled out for how they are using AI to solve business problems. What are the solutions that aren't just innovative but are immediately providing value to their businesses, which I think is a good way to go at. Bose also mentions that he sees that this goes from technical novelty to practical integration, which is exactly, it's a nice succinct way of saying what we're seeing from the market as well.
Yeah, and we've seen quite a few of these already. There's a few in here that I was like, oh, I probably need to go get some insight on, but most of them we've seen. And I mean, I was pleased to see where they had focused and some of the things they had picked out of the market. These are most of these are pretty big companies. In the past, we have had a few more sort of smaller startups in some of this, I think. So this is good to see, or it's interesting to see sort of who's in this lineup here and who would have gotten something in the past. We know Workday Wellness just came out. They've invested a lot in that. We know Plum's done a lot of updates to their platform. We know ADP Lyric has sort of reinvented sort of what it's doing in the market with the new market analysis and their team approach to management. So I think, this is a wide swath of organizations. And I do believe this will be the first year I could be wrong on this, but I believe it's the first year that they're going to be doing this sort of ballroom event for the awards this year. So congratulations to everybody. I think they'll also be doing this at the same time they're doing the awards for the winners of the HR Executive Magazine top HR and HRIT professionals as well. So those are good at the same time, which I think is always fun. So
So congratulations to them, and also congratulations to Jason Saba, good friend, came out of the analyst community. Strangely enough, not at Saba, very confusing, but he's worked for a long time at UKG, over 7.5 years, and has now joined Harry. So that's HARRI. If you don't know them, they have appeared in our report before, not too long ago, in sort of the up and coming space. I'd say that's still a good way to think of them. And Jason likes that idea of going over there and being part of kind of that team and growing it. And Jason, we reached out to him because anyone that's been following this show for a long time will remember Jason once made an appearance because we were recording live at a UKG event.
yeah.
There's even video. We have a video, by the way. If you're listening to this, you can find us on YouTube. So Jason said that he'll be at HR Tech this year with members of his new team. Please come say hi.
Yep. And it's probably good to note that for Jason, he not only did he work at UKG for many years, he also then worked at Dayforce, which was Ceridian Dayforce at the time, for many, many years. So long-standing experience in time and workforce management space before he was an analyst in the space, which is where many of us got to know him at. So I think, Harry is a perfect place for him to land. His expertise will add a lot to what they're doing. They're definitely more focused on talent and workforce management and time management. They've got some other modules as well, but very frontline focused as well. So this is I think it's a good partnership between them. I'm excited to see what Jason does here. So
yeah. Speaking of cool up and coming companies and people, Sarah Reynolds, who, at least for me, I first met them when they were at HiBob, or their chief marketing officer, but they were also at Udacity as chief marketing officer, has now joined Benefex. So very cool. It's always cool when you see the people. I don't always know everyone that's moving in these.
Yeah.
It's nice when you kind of put a face to the name and you just know they're wonderful people. So you wish the best for them. And that's definitely the case here. Plus, Benefex is definitely one to watch as well, right? That's one that we've been seeing a little bit from our report.
yeah, Benefix is in the sort of benefits space, right? Not surprising, get its name right. I have started to get into some briefings with them. We're definitely going to get more. I think it was great, again, to pick up Sarah with her wide range of background working with a lot of organizations. So we're going to kind of wait to see if we get some more updates from them on where that's all at. And very exciting to see sort of the support of the community around sort of all the we've known for a while that a lot of people that we work with are in transition right now from just job searches and stuff. And so I like seeing sort of not only new places where people are going, but also support that they're getting as they're moving into these roles. And, the market is starting to sort of take shape again, I think, as people have moved around. So good stuff to watch.
Yeah. And then we have some people, we don't know where they're going to end up yet. It might just be retirement. But first we have a Maxwell Wessel, or it could be Vessel. Here's one I don't know personally. Max, if you're listening and I pronounce your name wrong, please let us know privately. But Max will be leaving Degreed, where he was last co-CEO with David Blake, Degreed's founder and CEO, leaving David Blake as the CEO now. Now, Degreed had made a few hires back in April. I believe we covered it in the show, but Nicole Helmer joined as CPO. Nicole came from SAP, and Nag Chandrakishar joined as Degreed's first chief solutions officer. Also had been at SAP and Workday and Oracle. So, some people moves is going on at Degreed.
Yeah, and it's good to see where all of that is landing as well, because Degreed's, I think, trying to figure out where it fits in the space. I knew David a little bit more better in this sort of mix of groups of people, but I think I can tell you from our data that learning is a little bit up in air, right? Like people aren't quite sure what they're doing with their learning platforms. Where do they fit in this bigger picture of technology? And Degreed's in the mix of that conversation right now, right?
Mm-hmm. And then finally, this one's personal for me, as Jay Jamrog will be retiring from I4CP, the Institute for Corporate Productivity. Jay was the founder from the organization prior to that, HRI, the Human Resources Institute, and I previously worked for Jay. Although Kevin Oakes has long been the CEO of the company here in the Florida office, that was Jay's domain, and his I find him wonderful. I'm really happy he's retiring. He has just been great and was a key part of me sort of finding my own voice and learning. He takes a very academic approach. He came from the academic world, which worked for me, right? Because I had spent so long. I felt like in school, I think I added up one time, it was like 27 years I spent at university, all the different schools in university. So I just have a lot of really warm memories. I think some of my favorite were, just going into his office and kind of like Stacey and I will talk often before the show of just throwing ideas out and, kind of getting our head wrapped around some ideas. He just sort of pontificate and think about things, which would then allow me to sort of get that into hopefully a more pithy response for a paper or something like that. And I would always be remiss, one of my favorites is that he would always correct us for saying Likert scale, which I know is what most people assume that scale is called. That's of course, the 1 to 5, 1 to 7 scale. It's Likert scale. Dr. Likert worked with Jay and constantly corrected him. So then he felt the need to correct us, and now I feel the need to correct everybody. So Jay, you may be retired, never forgotten. Please enjoy your retirement.
Yeah, I didn't know Jay, but it sounds like he was great to work with, Cliff. So yeah, very, very good. The next conversation is not such a good story, though, right?
Someone not great to work with. Maybe,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not saying it. We had the firing of the head of the BLS, Erica McIntarfer, has been fired by President Trump. And that has caused quite a bit of disruption in our industry. Not that all the layoffs have, and all these things have been very disruptive, which is probably the nice way we can put it. But not having a solid source of data is, it kind of, I don't know, this is an existential problem, I guess, and maybe beyond the remit of this show. But often when we're talking about data, and Stacey mentioned it briefly earlier, right? She says we check it against sources, right? We validate data, and we need the only survey bigger than ours, as far as I know, is the BLS, right? I mean, they go out. You could say some for payroll. Some of the payroll companies can get larger payroll data sets, but not overall sort of the jobs and stuff like that. We rely on that. So we need to know, okay, is this the right split between small companies and large companies? What are they seeing in terms of layoffs compared to what we're seeing and what we're asking for and spending and all that sort of stuff? So not having a sort of source of truth could cause some disruption. And I think it's important to bring up, just because for American listeners, especially, you have to have trust in data, right? That's kind of the key thing, right? Because anyone would just say a number 6, sure, that's a number. But if we all sort of share the same reality of that, we agree that that is the truth, then we can work off that, right? You could have a counter argument. You can have different interpretations, data, sure, but you need the data to have an interpretation. So this has been kind of, well, I think will have very long-term repercussions. Much as we've talked about before, sometimes what seem like small decisions have huge impacts.
Yeah, and I think had already seen some of the budget cuts impacting BLS data. Like they had made the decision not to do like 3 major metros that they had been using. And it's important to note, like the BLS, they needed to upgrade and update. They've talked about that for I kind of feel like I know Erica personally, even though I've never met the woman and I've never been in any space with her. But because we use the data so much, we know kind of how they think. But I also participated as a small business owner in last year's census. Like I was the person who gathered that data, called me, sent me emails, sent me letters. Like that was a process they went through over 6 months to gather data every month, asking about like, where are you at? What are you doing? How many people do you employ? What do you, right? Like, and so that process was, and it was just so good to talk about how this is anonymous data. You're not going to be, no one's going to come back on you. And it's hard work to get this data. I think people oftentimes think they just hit a button and it comes out of some report that, because you roll in reports into the market. They actually do surveys. They go out and do interviews. They go out and capture information. And then they compare that to what they get publicly and do validation themselves. And I think the other side of this is that, yes, we could leave this to entities like large organizations. Like ADP has jobs numbers that we now look at, and Paychex has SMB jobs numbers that we now look at. Those are very valid to, again, do validation. You need more than one source, and you need to make sure you have unbiased sources. So if ADP's jobs are only come from ADP customers, how is Workday going to base their job? Like, yes, it's a big data set, but it's not got Workday's customers in it, right? Like that's the challenge of having these sort of data sets that are very driven by specific corporations that aren't, their funding is not sort of set up in a way to sort of do an unbiased analysis of it. And so, yeah, this one hit hard for us, I think, just because updates might need to be made, but that role shouldn't be tied to any, like, the data that comes out of that. How you interpret it is a different conversation, but the data itself shouldn't be held up to, well, I don't like those numbers, so you're not going to work here anymore kind of conversations. So just, yeah, I was sad. It's really hard to see that entity sort of, I'm hoping they invest more in it and they bring someone in who respects the value of that data in the market, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And just like I said, we were just on a webinar, and there's over 1,000 people there, and Stacey would give a statistic, and they'd say, "Where did you get that?" And I'd send the link, and that's the end of conversation, right? Because they'd say, "Okay, there's where it's from. I can see that's World Economic Forum." Now imagine I send them a link that's like Steve's House of Opinions or something. They're gonna go, I don't care. Like what is this, right? It's a trusted source that allows it to say, okay, now we can build upon that and move to the sort of insights analysis. And not having that trusted source again means that you're kind of flying in the dark, right? Because everything stems from some sort of ability to say, this is the foundation upon we build this house, and you're just taking out the foundation. So we'll see. Like I said, you sound hopeful, Stacey.
I'm always looking at I always look at the silver lining. There's got to be and you never know who's going to take place. And if they upgrade the tech in that space, that would be really, really beneficial, right? Like, but let's hope that that's the case, right? So
yeah, and speaking of optimism, we said it's good news. This was a post from Brett Ungashik from Outsale that was looking at some sort of key indicators, and the first one he's looking at this week was on fundraising. So, late July, we saw two different companies raise quite a bit. Sparrow with 35 million in Series B, Ashby with 50 million in Series D. Both of them are, HR tech startups. Sparrow in AI supported leave management, and Ashby in recruiting. Again, TA, very huge. So, this sort of indicators from the market they see strength here. They see movement. We see these big acquisitions. We see, as we've seen, people moving into these new companies. Some of the job stuff is pretty dire, but HR and HR tech is still standing strong, as we've talked about before, and we're still seeing the market investment, which is always the clear indicator, right? That's the data upon which I am going to build this house.
Yeah.
So that was really neat.
Yeah. And we should probably just note that with Brett, we do have a relationship with Outsale now, where we have a partnership where they're providing services. If you go to our website, you go to some of our sites, you can access their tools for helping select some technologies, not all, but some of the technologies in the market through their Outsale solution. The reason I bring it up is because we get requests all the time about using our data for selection, and it is a great tool for selection, and it's a big part of why we do the work. But then there's always the process of, how do I do communications? How do I do change? How do I do an RFP? How do I do that? Some of that work we provide on an advisory services level, but sometimes as I'm a small business, I just need a few little things to help me guide how I'm going to ask the right questions. Brett does a nice job of that with his platform. And so we've just basically tried to make that available, because we think it's always good to have those kind of relationships and to give people access to things that will improve their time and their processes. So that's something that we've just recently done with Brett. So yeah, very good to work with them.
And a good follow for the sort of market stuff if you're into the sort of the finance numbers, that sort of thing. And then finally, you're going to wrap up with a pretty neat book, and we'll have the link for it, an ebook put out through ServiceNow, HR's Role in AI Transformation. We know it's a hot topic. I thought it was pretty interesting looking at the sort of major 3 points that they expand on greatly within the ebook, but they believe that it requires 3 things. And if we're going to do this right, reimagining AI-powered HR by partnering closely with IT. Definitely sounds familiar, something we've been
talking about what we just said, yep.
And have quite a bit of data on. Being prepared in your organization by reskilling for AI, identifying future skills, frameworks. Yep, that's something we can definitely agree with, something we also talk about quite a bit. And transforming the workforce by integrating AI as digital twins, teamwork, teammates, whatever the case may be, and embracing a sort of agentic model. And figuring out, again, where that works within your particular workplace. So I like it because it does have sort of a playbook model to a lot of stuff that we talk about quite a bit. I'm not just promoting because I agree, but I'm
Yeah.
agreeing. So
We actually have very little relationship with ServiceNow right now. But I think it was a nice tool, and I think they're using their own selves as a bit of a case study in this. So I really liked them putting it out. I thought it was well worth it. Yeah.
yeah, so a pretty interesting, like I said, big news. We know it went a little bit longer, but thank you all. I really, really love it when there's all these stories. And thank you all also, I want to say before we wrap up, for all the comments. I've really enjoyed talking to people through this. I know we mentioned who was it that wrote? Matt Charney that wrote the really funny, making fun
Yeah.
of.
He was surprised, but he said when the analysts take me seriously with my diss, he goes, I don't even know where to go with that, right?
Yeah, there was some really fun sort of
Yeah.
jokes that went on. I know I put the link in the thing, but if you can find it on LinkedIn, everyone's kind of role playing it, saying, "Yeah, I'll agree to endorse this post if you give me the upper right of your quadrant or whatever." So pretty
Yes.
funny stuff.
Yeah. Also, just so you guys are aware of where we'll be at over the next couple of months, because we are starting to get back into travel season. I got a couple more weeks home, and that's it. After I've moved my kids and gone to see my granddaughter, I had to get at least a little bit of travel in there for family. But our first trip, I'll be at the ADP Innovation Day, September 3rd in New York City. And yes, to the team out there who keeps emailing me about scheduling my flights, I will do that. I just need to figure out what else was going on that week. And so I do understand that you guys need to get that stuff early. I'm terrible at it, but it's really hard to know what else we got going on those weeks. So if you do it too early, then you got to go back in and change it all on. The other place that we will be, as we have mentioned multiple times, is HR Tech, September 15th through 18th in Las Vegas. Both Cliff, myself, Susan, Terry, our whole team, including Kendall, who is our new support person, and Tammy Smith, whose first year will be going to HR Tech, and she's our data scientist expert. We will all be there, and you want to stay through Thursday because that's the morning of my session, and then you can fly out if you really want to. Also, Cliff, you'll be back in Las Vegas for SAP's event, possibly. We're having conversations about that, October 6th through the 8th. And then I will be at Dayforce doing their event October 7th through 8th at the Wynn in Las Vegas. So we'll both be in Las Vegas, probably getting a chance to chat. Oracle World will be another one back in Vegas, Cliff, October 12th to 13th. So it's just nonstop October Vegas events. November, you and I will both be at UKG Aspire, a 3rd through the 6th, again in Las Vegas. And then we get a bit of a break. We get to go to some regional stuff. I'm going to do November's iSolved Connect regionals, which will be in Philadelphia and Scottsdale, Arizona. I'm going to really look forward to those. Please come see. We're going to have updated data. It'll be great keynote sessions. You then, I think we're going to be in November. You're going to possibly go to Atlanta for their Unit 4 analyst event, Cliff. And then if you're interested, I think I can say this because it came in today. We've sold, I think, all of them. There's one more that if someone's been asking, and we're going to see if we can maybe fit it in, but we sold all the roundtables to the Finance Technology Expo that we were doing, where we're bringing in the HR conversation to the chief financial officers and the heads of finance. And that's November 13th and 14th at the CFO Council in New York. Very excited about that because we're excited about doing those conversations. If you've ever done an event in New York, it's very expensive. So most of the sponsorship money went to just kind of covering things like the $2,000 internet access that they charge for us. But we're really excited about doing this. We think that event's going to be really, really great. And we'll be there November 13th and 14th. If you're in New York and you want to join, let us know. We will have tickets for that. Even if you're both a vendor or practitioner or a head of HR or head of finance, all of those are invited to this event. I think it's going to be really, really powerful. And then I think that's it, Cliff, for the year. I also am going to be at the Workday European event, I think the week after that then. And so we will be sprinting to the end of the year. So
yeah, there may be something in early December, but we'll keep you updated. There's still time.
Yeah. So, and I know we've gone over by almost 10 minutes from my promised hour, so my apologies, team, but we are going to wrap it up today. So just a thank you to everyone who participated in the survey, who continues to listen to the podcast. We really do know and appreciate all of your time, your interest, and the conversations that you bring to us. If you're interested in signing up, getting all the news that we talk about here in our web format, please go to our website. We'll have a new one out in just about 4 weeks, maybe. So if you're having problems finding things on our website now, because it's, we're small business, things get kind of moved around. We're redoing the website again and the research center again every 2 years. It's a bit of a process. But go to the website, sign up for our newsletter. That will be your ongoing opportunity to see where we're going to be at, what we're speaking about, when the survey comes out, when the data comes out, all of that important information. Be sure to listen to our sister HR Huddle podcast, HR We Have a Problem, hosted by our CEO, Terry Zipper. And these HR Huddle episodes, if you like them, please be sure to like them, support them, download them, and leave comments. That is really, really important for us being able to keep them in the places where we're keeping them. Stay up to date with immediate breaking HR tech news and get all the behind the scenes content. You can follow us at Sapience on LinkedIn and Instagram. And thank you, Cliff, as always, for pulling this all together. Thanks to Brand Method Media Group, who helps to produce our podcast, run by amazing founder Kelly, who we just found out this week reached out to one of our clients because she heard about their great brand media and marketing work, and she did a podcast with them. So lots of cross-pollination here. And our marketing team, Summer Orlano, Cole Harris, Linda Galloway, Kendall is now added to that mix. We got a growing group there who's working on that. Thanks to our listeners and communities. We couldn't do this without you. And that's it for the episode of Spilling the Tea on HR Tech. We hope it's been just the brew you need to start the engines running this week. We'll be back in just 2 weeks with another pot of boiling hot HR Tech updates and insights. And that will be just before HR Tech. So you'll definitely want to attend that one. So thanks, everyone.
Bye.